All right. So welcome everyone. We're going to get started to today's live chat with Dr. Lewin and special guests Dennis and Angela Sabal. Today's live chat is on adopting with Microtia. And we're really excited to have these very, very special guests that are near and dear to all of our hearts, the Iracle's hearts, the Sabals, and we will, learn a lot from their experiences. Dr. Lewin, would you like to add any comments?
Yes, I would. So it is a really sort of an incredible little wonderful part of my practice that I happen to have a lot of families who have adopted children with Microtia. And it's always, very much pulls on the heartstrings that these kids, where in an all parallel world, where they would have ended up compared to where they go, and I've witnessed it time and again. It's just an incredibly special thing that I get to be a part of, and I feel like we've now had so many families that this is a really important, valuable talk, because Dennis and Angela, who I've known for many, many years since they adopted their daughter, Sarah, you're going to learn all about their story. But over these years, this family, all of the members of this family have really made it a big part of their lives to help others with Microtia, be they adopted or not adopted. And so they're just one of the most wonderful families I have ever had the pleasure to meet. And I consider them, essentially part of my own family as they watch my kids grow up, as I have watched their kids grow up. So I'm very honored that they agreed to have this talk, and I will let you learn a little bit more about their special family now.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us. We'd much rather be out in LA, but we'll take that. So Dennis pretty much handled our adoption, all the paperwork, and I pretty much handled the medical stuff. So I'll let him start talking about how we came to know Sarah.
Well, first of all, Tiffany, Cheryl, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk about probably one of the best decisions, which turned into many more best decisions that we've made throughout our lives. Mm-hmm. Adoption is interesting, and I think every person has their own unique story and their own unique reasons behind adoption. Our story is a bit unique in that I had just retired after 27 and a half years of active duty in the Marine Corps. So Angela and I had moved around. I think we moved 21 times during that 27 some odd years, and we finally settled here in Northern Virginia. While I was getting indoctrinated into a new career, Angela decided to take a sign language course. As a nurse, it's something she's always wanted to do. So at the completion of the sign language course, she was online and looking for places to be able to practice her sign language. And lo and behold, one thing led to another, and the picture that's up on the screen right now of that little angel popped up. And Angela did a little research and come to find out that not only was Ven Longshoying deaf, but she was also had bilateral Microtia. I came home from work that afternoon. I still remember, it was a rainy afternoon. And Angela had printed that out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And when I walked in the door, I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "It's your daughter." So that was, no kidding, the way that we started this journey. And as I said before, it's been a wonderful journey. For us, it was, we knew that she had bilateral Microtia, so we started doing the research very early on.
And it wasn't so easy, because back then, 12, 13 years ago, there weren't all these Facebook pages. So we had to really look on the internet and just read websites and, try to gain information that way.
Angela, is that now why you're the creator of like 8 different support groups?
Well, once Facebook came along, I wanted to share what I knew. And now it's all pretty much my largest groups that I created is the BAHA World and the BAHA Kids Club. And in each group, when you join, there's a series of blocks, and that has pretty much information on, different hearing devices, whatever you're interested in learning. You can just scroll through and there's links. It's not opinion, it's facts, just information that, whenever you do something like this, somebody came before you and already did all the work. So it's all neatly placed and hopefully pretty much up to date. I mean, technology is constantly evolving, but it's a little bit easier now. Plus you have the support of other parents. We didn't have that. We never heard of such a thing. We thought, what? She doesn't have ears? And it's funny because now we know more kids without ears than with ears. So when we went to China, we were told she was deaf. Now I know deaf is different to different people, but we were told she was deaf. And do you want to?
Yeah, so basically what happened, just to back up just a little bit. So we knew she was deaf. So Angela, and we knew that she had bilateral microtia and atresia. So Angela took off on the medical side to learn as much as she could. I pretty much took the focus of doing all the adoption paperwork and the Homestudies and all the things that it takes, to be able to accomplish the adoption. And we set it in our minds that from the time that both of us saw that picture, that she was our daughter, and we were going to make this happen, and we were going to do it as quickly as we could. What was very interesting was that we had to petition, in Sarah's case, the Chinese government, to allow us to adopt her. And we actually got the approval stamped on December 25th of 2006. So that was kind of an interesting date for the government to say, yes, we agree that you all can adopt her. So we went through the process, which was, a lot of, Homestudies. They want to know everything about you. And, it's invasive. They ask you questions that you probably have never been asked before. But ours was a little interesting too, because we lived in Virginia. The adoption agency was in Texas. And so we basically had to abide by both. We had to do Homestudies in both states. And it was just interesting to get through that. But again, anyway, we tried to expedite things as quickly as we could. And the one thing that really drove us was this need for information. And I think that that's what drove Angela later on into establishing all the groups that she established, because as she said, there really wasn't one place that you could go to get information. And any little piece, from back then, I think it was Yahoo groups or something, somebody that was traveling to China to pick up a child, can you see a picture? Can you find this? Because you wanted everything you could. And the process, interestingly enough, it had its challenges. Its biggest challenges for us was U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. For why, I really don't know. Everything else seemed to be very smooth. And interestingly enough, to the day that we actually adopted Sarah in China was 9 months. So that's another interesting number there. I will say one thing, that if you, in adopting an older child, one of the things that, because Sarah was 6 at the time, one of the things that in all of the Homestudies and the classes that the states make you go through, that they really don't talk much about is older children. So apparently most of the adoptions that are done for infants. So there are some additional things, to be aware of when you do adopt an older child. I know Angela's going to touch on those later, but I just mentioned that now. Those were some things that we didn't see. So a lot of the classes we went to really weren't applicable to us. But, you know, we were very, very fortunate because when we got to China, Sarah was just over the moon and couldn't wait to get out of there and get home. So we were very blessed and very fortunate.
Yeah, many times the older children don't want to leave the only life they know. So, but Sarah was ready to go. There was none of that.
So by the time we got her home, I think one of the first places that we went was down to UVA to see Dr. Kesser, and I'll let Angela take it from there.
Well, we went to see Dr. Kesser, and at the time we thought we would probably go toward canalplasty because that's what I was reading. So we went to see Dr. Kesser, and he said, you know, I have some good news and some bad news for you. And we said, all right. And he said, well, she's not a candidate for canalplasty, but she is a candidate for the bone anchored hearing device. And he put a little headband on her head and she just lit up like a Christmas tree. And I just thought, oh my goodness, how can I leave this appointment without that? You know, she has had no hearing for 7 years. So it was rather urgent for us because we brought her home in August and she needed to start school. And, you know, everybody wants their child to be prepared for school. So that set us on another journey. They said, listen, don't worry, we're going to put it in through your insurance and, you know, she'll get her 2 bilateral BAHAs, bone anchored hearing aids. And we were shocked to learn that insurance denied us. So that's a whole nother issue that happens a lot. Even what you have to do is you have to go back and appeal, you know, denial, appeal, denial, appeal, denial, appeal. You know, eventually it all worked out. And, you know, Sarah had to, you know, she had to go to school. Now, I will tell you with kids in an orphanage, you know, she was 7. And there are some social delays, yes. Right? You know, we adopted a 7-year-old and really what we got was a 4-year-old. So although she was smart as a whip, you know, we brought her to school and she just had babyish behaviors. And we thought, you know, she can't really sit in a 2nd grade with no hearing. You know, she just came to a new country, new family, new food, new everything. And she can't hear, so we decided to put her in kindergarten. And that actually worked out for us because, you know, Sarah was my main event. My other kids were grown. I had all the time in the world to spend with her, and we worked with her at home. Sometimes it was a little bit exacerbating, right, Dan, with the math?
Yes. Yes, but
in the beginning.
In the beginning, but one of the things with Sarah, and I know those of you, you know, who know her, she is a very driven young lady. And one of the things that that Sarah would tell you if she was here today is that she contributes her success to just some fantastic people that have given her opportunities to be able to succeed. You know, one, of course, would be Dr. Kesser, was the initial one who, you know, brought to her this whole thing about hearing, which she had never experienced before. And then Dr. Lewin, who we said, I think these surgeries were very long back in those days. And we had our trips out to California, and Sarah each time was able to get just the most incredible surgery for her ears, which she just loved. I mean, it did so much for her, you know, just as a person. But also we found out about a year later as we were walking up and down the street, when I was trying to teach her how to read numbers, she would walk all the way up to these big numbers that were on the houses. And I said, can't you see those? She said, no. So we realized that her sight was really poor and she was going to need glasses. So thankfully she had ears now to put the glasses on. And so from there, she just took off.
Well, you know, one of the things when you're adopting a child with microtia, you have a little bit of an advantage because you have time. Time is on your side. All the time he you're doing the paperwork, you can learn, you can know who the doctors are, you can know what devices, you can know the school system. You know, you can learn all this and have a pretty good handle on it, versus if you have a biological child, sometimes there's shock, there's grief, there's all these other things, and you're rushed into making decisions. We didn't have that. We had time on our side with that. But once she came to America, we had to hit the ground running with her. So some of the, we were gonna discuss, we're all over the place with these pictures. You know, the difference.
I'm sorry for interrupting. It's funny, we had like a screen share situation, so don't mind us, but maybe, do you mind if we just like cruise through some of these photos and then we can stop the share and then you can just chat? Would that be okay?
Okay.
We did see, you know, Dr. Lynn and Sarah like at surgery, and then some of her before and after pictures. And Dr. Lynn, do you want to scroll up for a second? These, Sarah's ears are now 12 years new. And, you know, they still look amazing. And Angela, you've never had any issues or anything, correct?
Well, we had a problem with an ear piercing.
Oh.
Unfortunately, she developed a keloid in one of her lobes. So
okay.
That kind of comes and goes. So
I can remember that.
It has nothing to do with her ear reconstruction.
Yeah.
And Dr. Lewin is constantly improving and making these ears so great. But I got to tell you, she does the 3D ear now. And Sarah being bilateral, and we weren't her biological parents, you know, it was like, gosh, you know, whose ears are we going to use? So in walked Dr. D, and the rest is history. So we thought, this is great. So Sarah has Dr. D's ears.
And Dr. D is our anesthesiologist at Cove Surgery Center. So.
And you know, this has just been such a positive experience for us in that, you know, we've just made the best friends for life, you know, just so many different people on the sites, you know, just like Dr. Lewin said, you know, you just kind of grow up and attach to these people and follow them through. And, you know, Dr. D recognized Sarah immediately, and Sarah the same. So it was a really good experience. Some of the, I would say some of the setbacks for us, if we had to talk about some setbacks, would be, she had a few additional diagnoses that we weren't aware of. I mean, the Microtia and atresia was obvious, but she also had a foot problem and hemifacial microsomia, ever so slightly morphed into micronathism. So her lower jaw, she's actually going to be having jaw reconstruction on the 23rd, where they're going to pull her jaw out, and you know, because her lower jaw was just way set in. So, you know, I wish I had the same confidence in that doctor as I do with Dr. Lewin. It's just a whole, I'm just so comfortable in Microtia and atresia, and it's like suddenly the jaw, like really, and what we're having a terrible time in that Sarah's in college now. I got to fly her home for orthodontic appointments. So it's a little awkward, but we couldn't have addressed this any sooner because it usually doesn't present till after puberty.
And if you take a look at the picture that's up right now, I wanted to mention one thing. One of the things that Dr. Lewin always was very clear with us on is don't limit Sarah. You know, don't worry about, you know, the ears, let her play sports, let her do those things. Now, we were petrified. Mm-hmm. But as you can see from her trophy wall there, Sarah just took and grabbed every single opportunity that was thrown at her. She's been running since she was 8 years old here. She was varsity track. She was on the varsity swim team.
And even after that foot surgery, which was terrible, it was basically an extraction of a bone, or what do you call it when they lengthen it?
Right.
Not extraction, but.
And then she decided she wanted to be in the school band. So she went to the band director, and where, you know, most kids would probably say, oh yeah, gee, I'll play the flute or something like that. She asked the band director, she said, what do you need? And he was shocked, and he goes, well, he says, we don't really have, like, we only have one oboe player, but oboe's a very hard instrument to learn. She goes, okay, that's what I'm going to learn. And it was just amazing. People forget that Sarah is deaf. They have no idea that her ears are, have been constructed. And that brings into another challenge that we have in school. And I'll let Angela talk about that.
Some of the things in school, because Sarah was such a high achiever, it was sometimes hard for us to get services because they would rather wait until you're failing. And then, you have all these meetings and decide what you need. We didn't want to wait for that. And even like one, her science teacher, he's in a big science lab, concrete walls, floors, beakers, fans, everything. And he's asking me, do you really think Sarah needs that FM system? She can hear me. And I said, you just constantly have to educate and advocate. You can never, ever, ever let your guard down. And I said to him, yes, she can hear your voice, but this helps to clarify the speech. And, he took it all in. Oh, okay, but, it's just constant advocacy. And you have to teach your child how to advocate for themselves. And I'll tell you a little funny story. With Sarah, she was up at college and she had gone through 3 roommates through no fault of her own. These kids just didn't work out, didn't want to leave home. They had their own issues. And, Sarah's like an only child, So now she's got these roommates that she's having to mother, And finally, so the one girl left, they put another girl in who lasted 1 day. And they put a third girl in. And then Sarah said, you know what, I'm done. So Sarah goes down to the housing office and she calls me up and she says, Mom, I wasn't going to tell you this until I solved it for myself, but I'm going to have a room change. And I said, why do you have to move? Why are they moving all these kids in your room? Why do you have to be the one to move? And she says, Mom, I've got this huge single room with a bathroom. And it was a proud moment because now she does things for herself. She's not going to be walked on. She's not going to be stepped on. She is going to get what she can. And I tell her, hey.
So that brings back an important point, just not to miss in this when, and it'll be one of the points that I'll wrap up with. But the school was very good with the IEP in having right from the beginning that Sarah would learn how to advocate for herself. Mm-hmm. And, when you have a tiger mom like Angela, it is very hard to keep her, on the leash and not wanting to go up to that school, every time something doesn't go quite the way you want it to go. Mm-hmm. But Sarah, very fortunately, learned real quickly, how to advocate for herself. And it has really been, I think it's just testimony to her own personality, but we did push that. And now that she's in college, and those of you who may, have young children and haven't gone to college yet, this first surprise you're going to have is the only thing the college cares about talking to you about, parents, is the check. Every single thing else is the child. And, there's no, kind of halfway there. So we, having your child be able to advocate for themselves, even children that don't have any type of disability is going to be really important when they step off into college. So I'll just throw that in.
Definitely. So,
hey, Angela, do you want to, just to kind of switch gears for 1 second, and then we can stop the screen share. So in the beginning, you showed the cute picture that stole your hearts of Sarah. And then the second picture was the picture of the orphanage in Chengdu, China. Mm-hmm. And then I remember kind of hearing about this story. Do you want to just talk about this briefly?
Sure. Sarah, this is a picture of Sarah and Paul, this boy named Paul, the blonde-haired boy, and they were in the orphanage together. Well, anyway, scholarships. Sarah got a scholarship for overcoming adversity through a company called Allen and Allen Law Firm. And there were 12 kids chosen, 12 or 15, I forget. And there were over 500 applicants. And Paul was another one who received a scholarship. So they all went to called their name and gave a little brief history about who they are, blah, 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 where they're going. And afterwards, something about Paul just stuck out. And I said, hey, Sarah, let's go talk to Paul. So afterwards, I said, hey, Paul, and I went up to him. Now, Paul's blind. And I said, and I could tell he was Asian. And I saw his mother, you know, she looked like me. And so I knew he was adopted. So I asked him, you know, what country he was from. And he said China. And I said, oh, and I had Sarah next to me. And I said, you know, Sarah's from China too. This is my daughter, Sarah. And he said, oh, and he was so pleasant. And he said, you know, what city are you from? How were you found? Were you abandoned? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, they both had the same story. Paul was found by a police officer, brought to the orphanage. Sarah was brought there. So by now we're like, wow, this is too much of a coincidence, you know, that they're both from Chengdu, China. I wonder if they were in the same orphanage. So we went home that day and Paul's mother sent me the picture and she said, you know, look at this picture. And it was like, wow. So anyway, it was today, to this day, they are like such good friends. So it was just weird out of the billions of people in the world, how both kids from China who were both abandoned and brought to the same orphanage would somehow be reunited last year
In Virginia.
in Richmond, Virginia, receiving the same scholarship.
That is amazing. That is like, I just got goosebumps again. Like that's the craziest story ever. And then both getting scholarships. I mean, it just is a testament to them. It's amazing.
Yeah. So it has been, the story just keeps getting better. I mean, we just, you know, again, this was our best decision that we ever made, you know? So,
Angela, do you want to, and Dennis, you're such an advocate for hearing amplification, the BAHA, the bone-anchored hearing systems. Do you want to talk, just maybe go into a little bit more on like your beliefs on, you know, the importance? I know that you and I both are in different boats being, you know, with bilateral children and really no option, but, you know, you're such a great advocate, you know, for the BAHA or just, you know, making sure that they do have the proper amplification. Is there anything you would want to add on that?
Well, I would add that technology is constantly changing. So I think you always have to keep your eyes open and give your child the best tools available. I can't really speak for unilateral because my child's bilateral, so I never had to make a decision. Should I aid, should I not aid? I mean, she had to be aided. And, you know, it's kind of funny, every time Sarah gets a new device, it's like, woohoo, I can hear. And I thought we already arrived. I thought you had the best hearing, you know? And it's like every device is just better and better and better. And, you know, I think you just really need to keep up on technology. I just hope we can always afford it. I mean, it's not cheap.
Right.
One of the things that we did also is that she's tried all the different ones. So we've had her try all the different brands. And, you know, she actually is the one that chose you know, the processors and the things that work for her. And even to this day, you know, when it's time for replacements, we try different ones and, you know. I
always have an open mind.
Right.
You know, Sarah is implanted. She has a universal abutment. So we could go with either the top two companies, Cochlear or Oticon. There's other things that are a little more invasive that I'm not really interested in right now because what I have is working. And she has normal hearing on the audiogram. So again, I just always keep keep watching. You know, some people chase technology with the iPhone. I don't do that. I chase the hearing devices. So
I have a couple questions from Jocelyn, if you don't mind. Did she speak or sign at adoption?
That's a really great question. And yeah, the answer is no. So there was no signing at all. However, there was a little bit of the local language, not Mandarin. Mandarin Sarah learned when she was back here because we had some exchange students from China come that were in high school. That's how she learned initially to speak Chinese. So she knew a little bit of the Sichuan dialect, but very, very little.
Sarah developed speech in China because she was in an orphanage. So the beauty of being in a loud environment was she can't, without aiding, she cannot hear anything below a dog bark. But because you're in a place where they're always screaming and shouting, you know, she developed speech. So that really worked out well for her. When she went to school, you know, they tried to encourage us to do the signing. And you know, to me, language is good. Chinese, whatever you want to take, English, ASL, hey, it's all language. I found her through sign language. I've since forgotten most of it, but now Sarah's in a place where she does know sign. In fact, she's applying to be at school a teacher's assistant for ASL. So she does sign, she does speak Mandarin, she speaks English. We had the exchange students come over. They had to teach her the 3 M's, music, math, and Mandarin.
Cute.
Because I wasn't good in any of those.
Great. I have another question, and you kind of addressed this already, but maybe you could just reiterate on it. How does like having the adoption at an older age impact with language acquisition with bilateral? So, you know, maybe just like the delays. And
I would say, Sarah, we probably should have pushed a little harder for the speech therapy. I think she had, and she still has a little bit maybe of expressive language delay, but a lot of it was under the radar because we'd think, is that Chinese? Is it English? You know, and we'd ask the exchange student, is she making these mistakes in Mandarin too? So
the one thing that we had to remember is that not only after Sarah was implanted was she learning, you know, how to hear, but she had to also learn how to listen because she never did before. So what we would find a lot of times when we would initially talk to her, she would just give an answer and it might not even relate to the question that you asked, but she never had to hear anything. So that was something we had to be sensitive to make sure that, you know, that teachers understood and that we understood that she has to learn things. She has no base where, like when we put her into kindergarten, the average kindergarten child has already had books read to them. They know their alphabet. They know all those things and they've heard voice, you know, for 4 or 5 years. Sarah had heard nothing. So that was a little bit more of a challenge, but as long as we were aware of that, then we were able to work with it.
Can I ask a question of you both? Just, you know, there's so many families in my practice that have adopted children with Microtia. Very, very impressive number. And if there's somebody either interested in adopting or has recently adopted a child with Microtia, I know you guys have found ways to make connections with other families, and I feel like that's a very, very important thing that we can do today with the prevalence of Facebook groups and such. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how did you connect with other families? How has that been helpful? If somebody's considering, what would you suggest they do to try to learn more about the process?
Well, before Angela talks about the technology end of it, I'm going to talk about this wonderful doctor who would invite us to her conferences and would give Sarah at a young age the opportunity to get up and speak at those conferences. And believe it or not only did that build confidence in Sarah, but she had the opportunity, as did Angela, to talk to many parents you know, it's one thing when you hear it or you read it. It's another thing when you see the product. And that went a long way to help Sarah. And she would talk to parents. I still remember when you came to DC, I'll never forget the man that came up with his daughter, and he looked at Sarah, he says, I want my daughter to be just like you. Very special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Facebook, the groups. Just talk about technology.
Actually, I have a lot of people who do reach out to me. In fact, I usually wake up at least weekly to messages, and the question's always about the ears, you know. And right from the start, I was quick to always say, if I, you know, were to post something, you know, Sarah had Lewin ears. So, because make no mistake, you know, she has great ears, where some of them are not so great. So I find people, you can't just depend on the local doctor to do such a extensive surgery. The ears are the hardest thing to reconstruct, right, Dr. Lewin? And
certainly
everybody can't do it, you know. And if you look at somebody's webpage and you don't see good results, don't think your kid's going to be the first one. So, and, you know, I've referred a couple of people to to Iracles, you know, because they, you know, I mean, they're not bad doctors, but good intentions don't always make good results, you know. So, you know, I tell parents, adoptive parents, you've got the time, do the research, watch the groups, see who's complaining, see who's ranting, see who's raving, you know, look at ears, look at this, look at that. You know, you have time on your side to make good choices.
I think that's a good point to just for everybody to remember is that, you know, we live in a society today of instance, and we want things yesterday. And when it comes to things such as the surgery, we put a lot of time into our research. We looked at every single method that was available at the time of ear reconstruction, and we certainly looked at all the doctors that were available as well. So when we made our decision, we made a very good, conscious decision based upon facts, based upon, you know, having talked with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the things that sometimes, you know, it's important for us today to step back and to realize that, hey, this isn't something that has to be, you don't need to make this decision this week. We don't need to get it on the day planner. Mm-hmm. This is a lifelong decision. So this is something that we can take a little bit of time, do the research, and then talk to other people, which is just so important. People that have been through it and have seen it. And that just gives you a comfort and a confidence so that when you finally make that decision for your mm-hmm. child, mm-hmm. You know, you do it from a much more base of confidence.
Mm-hmm. Is right. There, and we have no regrets 12 years later.
I'm sorry. Is there any group that connects parents who have adopted children with Microtia?
Yeah, I didn't create the group, but there is a group, parents with adopted children from China, actually, with Microtia and atresia.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah. So, and you know what we do? We have what we call, you know, we have like traveler hearing aids. So sometimes if we know in advance if there's a bilateral family going over there, because I wish we had this, you know, we'll say, hey, you know, we have a hearing device, you know, it's an old one. It doesn't need to be programmed. If you want, you can take this with you and your child can hear English right from day one. So that's kind of nice. And that kind of gives them time, you know, to get appointments and to sort through things. So that's a nice thing that we do if we know of bilateral kids going over.
Another comment that I had, Angela, is and Dennis, I've heard you mention it a few times, and I don't want to misquote you, but talking about like the special needs adoption, you have said that, you know, in getting a special needs adoption, like Microtia isn't necessarily the one of the easiest, but you have mentioned like it's one that can be, you know, reconstructed or, you know, something you can like tackle. Do you want to address that in better words than I just used?
Well, it was interesting you bring that up because Sarah was not put up for adoption for quite a long time because she was believed by the Chinese government that because of the extent of her of her ear deformities, that no one would adopt her. And we're not really sure what changed or who actually got involved, but thankfully.
I don't know anybody older than Sarah. I think she might have been one of the first bilateral kids to be adopted.
Yes.
Because now we see younger kids, but never anybody older than Sarah. So, and to me, it's an easy thing to aid because they do have hearing. They aren't deaf. They just can't get the sound in. So if you give them a device that brings the sound in, their world has changed, whether you do reconstruction or not,
And then when you put ears on them, again, people don't see the little bone device that's sitting on the back of Sarah's big, thick black hair. So they have no idea that she's had ear reconstruction. They have no idea that she's hearing impaired.
And everybody's got some kind of crazy thing hanging out of their ears. So they just assume it's some sort of hearing telephone or something.
Some kids in school used to think it's a Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. It's on your head.
Yeah.
But I have a question for Dr. Lewin. Dr. Lewin, you've mentioned that sometimes during surgery, you've noticed some differences with the children who are adopted, like even from a surgeon's point of view. Do you want to address anything about that?
I'm not sure I know exactly what you were referring
to. I feel like at one point you had mentioned that sometimes, like even like torticollis or something, like in the orphanages, like different things like that.
Yeah, that is true. I wasn't sure where you're going, but it's not so much torticollis, but if it is head shape related, and the technical term is plagiocephaly or flat head. But what it is, we're conscious of it in America. Once we went to the back to sleep for all kids to avoid SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, everybody was on their back and they started getting flat on the back of their head. And if they tended to want to look one way or another way, they would get flat. So what happens when you're in the NICU, if you're a really sick baby, or if you are in an orphanage where there isn't, a mother there holding you all the time, you spend a very large amount of your time lying down. And just naturally, the shape of the head is sort of flattened at the back, either one side or another, or right at the back. So interestingly, it does have an effect, and it becomes a permanent effect on the shape of their head where the ear will go. So that's likely what you're referring to. But unless you have super short hair, hair does a great job of kind of hiding any of those issues. And so it's not terribly difficult to address.
Great, thank you. Dr. Lynn, did you have any additional questions or comments?
I just wanted to really thank the Sabal family. They've always been tremendous supporters of Iracles, of us, of our conferences. We love having their daughter's story because she's such an inspiration to a lot of our parents with younger children, just to see how much she has accomplished and such. So we really appreciate that they're able to share their story with us, and we always rely on them. If we run across a family that needs help, the Sabals are the first to jump in and offer their help. So thank you guys very much for everything, and thank you for joining us today.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
We might have one more question if you don't mind. Jocelyn, if you have a question, you can type it in, or to me, to everyone, or you can just email and we can get it to Angela, no problem.
Can I just ask it here?
Oh, hi, yes.
Hi, sorry. I just wondered, so Angela, it's nice. I know we've messaged. It's nice to see you in person. I was wondering two things. One, did Sarah, what kind of a voice did Sarah have in the surgery? Like, did she want the ear reconstruction? Was that her desire to have that ear reconstruction? And then secondly, I was just curious as to sort of the sequence. Did you do the ear reconstructions and then the abutments, or how did that work out?
Well, we did, We did the ear, well, here's the thing with Sarah. She didn't have the proper bone density to have the implant yet. So come to find out, things just really worked out for her, and we didn't even have to make a lot of these decisions because, which came first, come to find out, it was good that, she had the ear reconstruction because they didn't destroy the flap or whatever could happen. Dr. Lewin could certainly go on about that. But Sarah, we pretty much made the decision for her, to be honest. I feel like I'm her mother. Sometimes I say to her, hey, do you ever regret having your Lewin ears? And she looks at me like I had 3 heads. Do you regret having ears? So, there's some things, I'm the mother, she's the little girl. I know there's a lot of people who think, oh, you should wait until, your child makes a decision. I just thought she needed ears and I found the best doctor. Nobody regrets the decision. We've never had any problems and it worked out well for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And plus we had to do it, Sarah's older, it all had to fit into the right timeline, so that we could get insurance coverage and different things.
Jocelyn,
so,
maybe
sometimes I think, oh, maybe we should have waited. Look at the 3D ear now. I don't know.
I just wanted to address maybe your question, just because I've had some kids where either the parent or the child wasn't quite sure that they were ready for ears, but they are bilateral and they need to hear. So at what age do you do a surgical solution for them, which makes it easier to hear? The one thing I will just say with great strength is I'm open to talk to anybody anytime about their child's situation, but if you're going to do the BAHA first or any of these hearing solutions first, the placement is critical. It really is important. And just an ENT who isn't familiar with all the different types of ear reconstructions may not know the right place. So I even had one bilateral patient come and I marked where I would put their ears. So they could then go back with these markings on the kid and place the bone anchored hearing aid in a place that wouldn't interrupt it. So when people say they want a BAHA, I'm not sure that doctor is thinking, about all the really important things about placement of the BAHA. Because, if your kid plays baseball, maybe you don't want your BAHA really high, and there's just these subtle things. They're not really necessarily taught in your medical training or your surgical training. So, but they're really important for the child and the family, of course. So I'm happy to honestly discuss with anybody these issues, even if you're never my patient. It doesn't matter to me at all. I still kind of feel like I was put here to help all families with this condition that come my way or cross my path. And to the extent that I can, I'm happy to advise on just how to avoid making a mistake that just, could affect the ears later or would make you have to redo the BAHA, which has happened to us. Yeah. It's just nice to avoid that with some knowledge ahead of time.
And some of the new implants are very invasive, and I would imagine there's much more.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
And plus,
my daughter
can do both. She's not a one-trick pony at all.
Yeah, my daughter probably will be 7 by the time I'm able to bring her home from China. So she's on the older side, I think like Sarah was. I didn't know if there's what I need to be thinking about in terms of timing and surgeries and things like that, if that's the way we go.
Now, did we send you a hearing device?
Yeah, I have it.
See?
Oh, that's
Thank
awesome.
you.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Waiting to be able to
and a little headband and everything. So, and you have time. You're here now. You're researching. You're going to make good decisions because you're going to be informed.
I'll be informed. Yeah. Yep.
That's the take-home point, I think. Lean on some of your friends that have done this before, or experts that can give you some opinions. Just reach out to everybody. Everybody wants your daughter to have a successful life. So hopefully you can gain some useful advice.
Yeah, no, I've learned a lot from Angela and even from Shannon, who's also on. So
Yeah.
nice to have a little bit of a community.
We're excellent. Awesome. Well, that's the whole point of these live chats is we really try to strive to bring people together.
Well,
Great, thank
our hour is up, and so I would again like to thank everybody for joining us today, for those viewers, and of course our like incredible advocates. I don't think that the Microtia world has a better advocate than Angela and Dennis here, and you know, Sarah, like Dr. Lewin said, is just an inspiration for all of our kids. You know, Microtia or not Microtia, you know, she's just so incredible. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. This will be recorded and put on our website so you can watch it again, or, you know, please help, you know, share with your other friends that might be interested. Next week, we do have a live chat on jaw reconstruction. So follow our website for more information on that. So
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.